When 9-year-old Emma Chen whispered 5 words to a waitress at a roadside diner outside Barstow, California, those words triggered a chain of events that would expose a custody abduction, mobilize 3 law enforcement agencies, and prove that sometimes the difference between a child disappearing forever and going home safely comes down to one person choosing to believe what they see instead of what they're told to believe. The Desert Rose Diner sat along Route 58 where it crossed the Mojave, one of those places travelers stop because it's there, and because another 100 miles of nothing stretches ahead in either direction. It was late afternoon on a Sunday in September, the kind of day where heat shimmers rose off the asphalt and the air conditioning inside felt like salvation. Marcus Stone Wolf Hendricks pulled his Road King into the gravel lot and killed the engine, grateful for the break after 4 hours riding from Los Angeles. He was 52 years old, vice president of the desert. King's MC, a man whose Navajo and Irish heritage showed in his copper skin and gray-streaked black hair that he kept long and tied back. His leather vest bore patches that told a story, Desert King's rocker across the back, military service pins, a purple heart, and the kind of weathered appearance that came from 2 decades of riding through every kind of weather the Southwest could throw at you. He'd been a Marine, then a sheriff's deputy in San Bernardino County for 18 years before the job finally broke something in him that couldn't be fixed. The MC had saved him, given him purpose and brotherhood when the badge couldn't anymore. Wolf was heading to Las Vegas for a veterans benefit ride, taking the long way because sometimes a man needed the desert silence to clear his head. The diner was the kind of place that probably looked exactly the same in 1975 as it did now. Vinyl booths, laminate tables, a counter with swivel stools, and a jukebox in the corner that might or might not still work. A handful of other travelers occupied booths, a family with young kids, an elderly couple studying a map, a long-haul trucker working through a plate of meatloaf. Wolf took a seat at the counter, ordered coffee and a burger from the waitress, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes and the kind of competence that came from years of managing chaos in a small space. Her name tag read, Linda. While he waited for his food, Wolf did what old cops do. He watched. It was automatic, ingrained, the constant low-level surveillance of his surroundings that had kept him alive through 2 combat tours and nearly 2 decades of law enforcement. Most of the time it was just background noise, but every so often something would ping that internal alarm system. It pinged now. A man and a girl sat 3 booths down near the window. The man was maybe 40, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, the kind of aggressively normal outfit that screamed trying to blend in. He had thinning brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the soft build of someone who worked behind a desk. Nothing remarkable about him at all, which was exactly what made Wolf look closer. The girl was young, maybe 9 or 10, Asian features, dark hair cut in a bob, wearing jeans and a pink hoodie that looked new. She sat very still in the booth, her hands folded on the table, her eyes fixed on the plate of fries in front of her that she wasn't eating. The man across from her was talking, his voice too low for Wolf to hear the words, but his body language was wrong, too rigid, too controlled, like someone concentrating very hard on appearing casual. Wolf had seen that before, usually on people who were lying. The girl never looked at the man. She stared at her fries, occasionally nodding when he spoke, but there was no engagement, no warmth, no natural interaction between them. Wolf had a daughter himself, now grown and living in Phoenix, and he'd spent enough time around kids to know what normal looked like. This, wasn't it? Linda brought Wolf's burger and refilled his coffee, and he noticed she kept glancing at that same booth, her expression troubled. She caught Wolf watching her, and something passed between them, that silent recognition of shared concern. Wolf ate slowly, keeping his attention split between his food and the booth near the window. The man paid his bill, stood up, and put his hand on the girl's shoulder. The girl flinched just slightly, but Wolf saw it. She slid out of the booth and stood beside him, her posture rigid, her face carefully blank. They started toward the door, passing right by Wolf's position at the counter. As they passed, the girl's head turned slightly, and she made eye contact with Linda the waitress. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds, the girl's mouth moved in the tiniest whisper, barely more than a breath of sound. That's not my father. Wolf's cop instincts kicked into overdrive. He looked at Linda, who had gone pale, her hands gripping the counter edge. The man and girl were almost to the door now, the man's hand still on her shoulder in that possessive grip. Linda looked at Wolf, and he saw the desperate question in her eyes, the plea for someone else to validate what she'd just heard so she wouldn't have to carry this decision alone. Wolf stood up, his considerable height and presence suddenly very apparent in the small diner. He walked toward the door, not running, not aggressive, just moving with purpose. The man with the girl had just pushed open the door when Wolf's voice carried across the space. "Excuse me, sir, you forgot something." The man turned, his face showing polite confusion that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't think so." Wolf gestured vaguely. "Thought I saw something fall from your table." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, calculation flickering behind the glasses. He was weighing options, trying to decide if this was innocent or if something was wrong. "No, we're good. Thanks anyway." He turned back toward the door, his grip on the girl's shoulder tightening. Wolf saw her wince. Linda had come around from behind the counter, and now she stood near the register, her phone in her hand. She looked terrified, but determined. "Sir," her voice shook slightly. "I think maybe you should wait a moment." The man's face shifted then, polite confusion dropping away to reveal something harder underneath. "Look, I don't know what you people think is going on, but my daughter and I are leaving now. This is none of your business." Wolf positioned himself between the man and the door, not blocking it exactly, but making it impossible to leave without going around him. The girl stood very still, her eyes on the floor, but Wolf could see her small chest rising and falling too quickly, the kind of breathing that came with barely controlled panic. "Sir," Wolf's voice carried the authority of his old badge, "I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stay here for just a few minutes while we sort this out. The dispatcher's already on the line." "What dispatcher?" The man's voice rose. "This is insane. This is my daughter. We're on a road trip. This is none of your concern." Behind Wolf, Linda was speaking quietly into her phone, giving an address describing the situation. Other diners had stopped eating, sensing the tension, watching the scene unfold. The man made a sudden move toward the door, trying to push past Wolf while pulling the girl with him. Wolf stepped sideways, his bulk and training making it easy to block without touching. "Sir, you're going to want to wait for the authorities." The girl pulled away from the man's grip and ran, not toward the door, but toward Linda, who immediately put herself between the child and the man. The girl grabbed onto Linda's waist, her face pressed against the waitress's side, and Wolf saw her small body shaking. The man's face had gone from controlled to desperate. "Give her back. That's my daughter. You people have no right." Wolf's instincts had been screaming since the moment the girl whispered those 5 words, and now they were confirmed by every aspect of this situation. The way the girl had run to Linda instead of standing by the man who claimed to be her father. The way her fear was palpable now that she had someone protecting her. The way the man's story was fraying at the edges. A father would be confused, indignant, but not desperate in this particular way. This man looked like someone whose plan was falling apart. 3 minutes later, 2 San Bernardino County Sheriff's cruisers pulled into the diner parking lot, deputies emerging with hands on their weapons. Wolf knew the drill, had been on the other side of this kind of call countless times. He stepped back, hands visible, letting the professionals take over. The lead deputy, a woman in her 30s with sergeant stripes, assessed the situation with experienced eyes. She separated everyone, the man to one cruiser, the girl to another, with Linda staying close, Wolf to a third deputy for his statement. Over the next 90 minutes, the full picture emerged in pieces that Wolf overheard as deputies conferred by their vehicles. The girl was Emma Chen, reported missing from a park in San Francisco 3 days ago. The man was Richard Costner, the non-custodial biological father who'd lost parental rights 2 years prior after a domestic violence incident. He'd grabbed Emma during a supervised visitation that was supposed to happen at a community center, had managed to get her to a car before anyone realized what was happening, and had been driving for 3 days trying to get to Mexico. The supervisor at the visitation center had hesitated too long before calling police, uncertain if what she'd seen was really an abduction or just a miscommunication. By the time the Amber Alert went out, Costner had a 2-hour head start. He'd been smart, staying off major highways, using cash, avoiding cameras, but he'd needed food, and the Desert Rose Diner had been the wrong place to stop, or maybe from Emma's perspective, exactly the right place. Wolf stood by his bike, watching as Emma was wrapped in an emergency blanket despite the heat, watching as a detective from the San Francisco unit that had been coordinating the search arrived in an unmarked car. The girl was checked over by paramedics, given juice and snacks, surrounded by people trying to comfort her while maintaining the professional distance required for a case that would go to trial. Linda, the waitress, stood off to the side, crying quietly, still shaking from adrenaline and the weight of what could have happened if she'd dismissed what she'd heard, if she'd convinced herself she was imagining things, if she'd decided it wasn't her business. Wolf walked over to her. "You did good." Linda wiped her eyes. "I almost didn't say anything. I almost convinced myself I heard wrong." But her eyes, that little girl's eyes when she looked at me. "I have grandkids. I know what scared looks like." Wolf nodded. "Trust that. Always trust that." The sergeant who'd been first on scene approached them both. "Mr. Hendricks, Ms. Martinez, I need to thank you." This was textbook intervention. You trusted your instincts. You didn't confront aggressively. You kept the situation contained until we could respond. This girl is going home to her mother because you paid attention. Wolf looked over at Emma, who was sitting in the back of a cruiser with the door open, talking to a female detective who'd clearly specialized in child victims. "You hear that she's going home. That's what matters." The sergeant's expression softened. "For what it's worth, I ran your name. Saw your service record, Sheriff's Department, the Marine Corps before that. You've been putting yourself between bad guys and innocent people your whole life. Old habits die hard. They're good habits." The Desert King's MC was known throughout Southern California as one of the clubs law enforcement could work with, that showed up for veteran causes and community events, that lived by a code that meant something. Wolf had helped build that reputation, had insisted that the patches on their backs had to mean honor, not just rebellion. Today felt like proof that it meant something. The sergeant coordinated with San Francisco PD, and within an hour Emma's mother was on the phone, her voice breaking through the speaker as she spoke to her daughter. Emma cried, really cried, for the first time since Wolf had seen her, the kind of tears that came from relief so profound it hurt. Her mother was driving down from San Francisco, would be there in 6 hours, couldn't wait that long, but had no choice. The detective asked if Emma could tell them what happened, and the girl, with Linda sitting beside her holding her hand, explained in a quiet voice how her father had seemed normal at first during the supervised visit, how he'd asked if she wanted to see something cool outside, how the supervisor had been distracted by another family, how he'd picked Emma up and run to a car parked illegally at the curb. She'd screamed, but he'd covered her mouth, had driven away so fast that by the time anyone came outside, they were already gone. He'd told her they were going on an adventure, that her mother had said it was okay, that they'd be happy together. But Emma knew her mother would never say that, knew something was terribly wrong, knew her father wasn't supposed to take her anywhere without the supervisor present. She'd been taught about stranger danger, about what to do if she got lost, but nobody had taught her what to do when the danger came from someone she was supposed to trust. For 3 days, she'd ridden in that car, stopping only for gas and bathrooms, her father increasingly paranoid and erratic. He'd bought her the new hoodie at a truck stop, told her to act normal, threatened her in quiet voices about what would happen if she tried to get help. She'd tried once at a rest stop, had approached a woman and started to say something, but her father had grabbed her and pulled her away, apologizing to the woman about his daughter's overactive imagination. The woman had smiled and walked away, and Emma had learned that adults didn't always listen. But at the diner, something had been different. Linda had been watching, really watching, with the kind of attention that saw past the surface, and when Emma passed her on the way out, she'd taken the risk one more time, had whispered those 5 words to someone who looked like she might actually care. "That's not my father." And Linda had cared, had believed, had acted. Wolf listened to this account while leaning against his bike, his arms crossed, his face carefully neutral, even though inside he was thinking about all the times kids tried to signal for help and got ignored, about all the close calls that never got reported because they ended differently, about his own daughter and how lucky he was that she'd grown up safe. The sun was setting now, painting the Mojave in shades of orange and purple. Emma sat with Linda at one of the outdoor picnic tables the diner had set up, eating ice cream that Linda had brought out, talking quietly about small things, school and pets and favorite colors. Normal things that helped push back against the abnormal trauma of the past 3 days. Wolf walked over and knelt down beside the table, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. "Hey there, Emma. I'm Wolf." The girl looked at him with eyes that were older than they should have been. "You're the motorcycle man who stopped him." "Yeah, I guess I am. You were really brave today. You kept trying to get help even when it was scary. That took a lot of courage." Emma's voice was small. "Nobody believed me before." "I know, and I'm sorry about that. But Linda believed you. And now you're safe, and your mom is coming to get you." The girl nodded, then reached out and touched one of the patches on Wolf's vest, the purple heart. "What's this one? 4? That's for getting hurt while serving in the military. Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes," Wolf admitted. "But having it reminds me why I served, to protect people who needed protecting. Kind of like what happened today." Emma looked at him with sudden intensity. "Thank you for protecting me." Wolf felt his throat tighten. "You're welcome, kiddo. Any time." As full dark settled over the desert, Emma's mother arrived. The woman, Jennifer Chen, came through the diner door like a force of nature, her face streaked with tears, her whole body trembling. Emma saw her and ran, and the reunion was the kind that made everyone in that diner stop what they were doing and watch. Jennifer held her daughter like she'd never let go, sobbing into her hair, saying her name over and over like a prayer. Marco, Emma's stepfather, stood behind them with his own tears falling, his hand on Emma's back. They held each other for long minutes while deputies and detectives gave them space, understanding that some things were more important than procedure. When they finally separated, Jennifer looked around the diner until her eyes found Linda and Wolf. She walked over, still holding Emma's hand. "You're the ones who saved her." Linda shook her head. "Emma saved herself by being brave enough to ask for help. We just listened." Jennifer pulled Linda into a hug, then did the same to Wolf, this stranger in leather who'd chosen to get involved. "My baby," Jennifer's voice broke. "My baby was missing for 3 days, and I thought I'd lost her forever. I thought I'd never see her again." She couldn't continue, overwhelmed. Wolf understood. He'd seen enough grieving parents in his years as a deputy to know that the parents who got their kids back carried a different kind of trauma than those who didn't. But it was trauma nonetheless. "You have her back now," Wolf said gently. "That's what matters. Hold her tight and help her heal." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "The detective told me what you did, how you blocked him from leaving, how you trusted your instincts." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me back my daughter. How do I thank someone for that?" "You don't need to," Wolf said. "You just take care of her." Emma tugged on Wolf's vest. "Can I show my mom your motorcycle?" "I told her about it." Wolf smiled. "Yeah, kid. Let's go see the bike." Outside in the parking lot under the desert stars, Emma showed her mother Wolf's Road King, explaining in excited detail about how he'd stood in front of the door, how Linda had called the police, how the deputies had come so fast. The girl's trauma was still there, visible in the way she stayed close to her mother, in the occasional shadow that crossed her face. But in this moment she was just a 9-year-old, excited about a motorcycle and safe with her family. "Can I sit on it?" Emma asked. Wolf looked at Jennifer, who nodded through fresh tears. Wolf lifted Emma onto the bike seat, and the girl's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "When I grow up, I'm going to be brave like you and Linda," Emma announced. "I'm going to help people who are scared." "That sounds like a good plan," Wolf said. The Chen family stayed at a hotel in Barstow that night, Emma needing to be evaluated by doctors and interviewed by specialists before they could make the drive back to San Francisco. Before they left the diner, Jennifer gave Wolf and Linda her contact information. "I want you both to be part of Emma's life if you're willing. Jennifer said. She talks about you like you're heroes, and honestly, you are. We'd like to stay in touch. Linda nodded, still crying. I'd like that. Wolf agreed. I'd be honored. Over the following months, the Chens and Wolf maintained contact through calls and messages. Emma's recovery required therapy, but she healed. She became confident again, learned to trust again, though she carried the wisdom of someone who'd seen darkness and survived it. Richard Costner went to trial and received a sentence that would keep him away from Emma until she was an adult. The supervised visitation center where the abduction had occurred implemented new protocols. Linda received a community service award from San Bernardino County. And Wolf, he kept riding, kept showing up for veteran causes and community events, kept being the kind of man who paid attention when something felt wrong. 6 months after the diner incident, the Chens drove down to Barstow for a visit. Emma had grown taller, more confident, but she still carried a small photo in her backpack, a picture of her with Wolf and Linda taken outside the Desert Rose Diner the night of the rescue. They met at the diner again, Linda's shift, and sat in the same booth where it had all started. Emma ordered fries and actually ate them this time, talking about school and friends and the therapy dog her mom had gotten her. That night at dinner, Emma said something that Wolf would remember forever. My therapist says that bad things happen sometimes, but they don't have to define us. She says I get to choose what the story means. What does it mean to you? Wolf asked. Emma thought about it. It means that when something is wrong, you should ask for help even if it's scary. And it means there are people watching who care, who will help if you ask. You and Linda taught me that. Sometimes I think about all the people who didn't listen, and I feel sad. But then I remember you did listen, and that's what mattered. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed Wolf's hand. She's right. You listened when it counted. That's the difference between my daughter being here with me and being gone forever. Wolf looked at this kid who'd survived something terrible and come out the other side wiser and braver, who'd learned that asking for help worked because someone had actually helped. You taught me something too, Emma, that paying attention matters, that trusting your gut matters, that being willing to get involved even when it's not your business matters. You made me remember why I became a cop in the first place, to stand between people who need help and people who would hurt them. The Desert Kings MC started a program after Emma's rescue, Watch and Act initiative. They partnered with schools and community centers to teach children that asking strangers for help in genuine emergencies was smart, not dangerous. They taught adults to recognize signs of distress in children, to trust their instincts, to understand that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is pay enough attention to see someone who's trying to be seen. Over the next few years, 3 more Desert Kings members intervened in situations involving children in danger, based on subtle signals they had learned to recognize. Each time someone paid attention, trusted their gut, and acted. Each time a child went home safe. Wolf kept in touch with Emma as she grew. When she turned 16, she showed up at a Desert Kings community event wearing a t-shirt she'd designed. Herself showing a diner and a motorcycle with the words, "That's not my father." If something feels wrong, speak up. Someone is listening. She'd made 50 shirts and donated all proceeds to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I want other kids to know what I learned, Emma told Wolf. That there are people watching, that asking for help works, that you're never completely alone even when you feel like it. I want them to know about people like you and Linda who chose to get involved when it would have been easier to look away. Wolf looked at this young woman who'd been a terrified 9-year-old whispering desperate words to a waitress, who'd been brave enough to keep trying even after others had ignored her, who'd grown into someone who wanted to help other kids feel less alone. Your mom raised a remarkable person, Wolf said. You helped raise me too, Emma replied. You and Linda showed me what it looks like to care about strangers, to pay attention, to act when it matters. That's the kind of person I want to be. Because that was the truth. One person paying attention could save a life. Trusting your instincts when something felt wrong was worth the risk of being mistaken. Getting involved and potentially looking foolish was a small price to pay if it meant a child went home to their family instead of disappearing forever. The story of Emma and the Desert Rose Diner became part of Desert King's MC identity, a reminder that their role wasn't just charity rides and veteran support, but being present, aware, and willing to act when vulnerable people needed someone to see them and take them seriously. If you've ever noticed something that felt wrong in a public space, if you've ever wondered whether you should get involved or mind your own business, Emma's story is your answer. Children in danger are often trying desperately to signal for help in ways that require us to truly see them, to listen to whispers instead of waiting for screams, to trust our instincts even when we might be wrong. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that awareness matters, that one person choosing to act can stop a nightmare in progress, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is believe a child who's trying to tell you they need help. Tell us in the comments, have you ever noticed something wrong and acted on it? Have you taught the children in your life that asking strangers for help in real emergencies is okay? Your awareness matters because predators and abductors count on bystanders looking away, and every person willing to pay attention and act becomes part of the solution that brings children home safe.